Right, this is a difficult one for me to do because I got very angry again about, well, I got very angry because these letters have been coming out to teachers and the figures involved on them, to my mind, are completely and utterly misleading. You're being asked to make a decision about money you've paid into the scheme for extras from 2015 to 2022, and you're being given figures in the letters that are just not comparable. And there's no note on the early letters. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go through this and explain why I feel there's a problem. And I think it's a big problem, particularly if you had letters before March or before April. The remedy involves looking back at what happened between 2015 and 2022. And a lot of teachers bought extra. They paid more into the pensions. They realised that the career average scheme, or they thought the career average scheme, was not going to be as good as the final salary scheme. And so they put extra money in by buying one of the flexibilities. Now, those flexibilities in the career average scheme consisted of early buyout, faster accrual, or additional pension. I'm not going to go into how those work and how they actually gave you extra, but essentially you had to pay more to get them. For the early buyout, you paid a percentage of your salary. For the faster accrual, you paid a percentage of your salary. For additional pension, you had a set figure in pounds and pence that you had to pay each month or in a lump sum. All three of these involved you handing over money. You handed over a sum of your money every month or in a lump sum to the teacher's pension scheme for the promise of a better pension when you retire. Now, that's all good. However, with the remedy, we're cancelling that career average scheme and we're putting everybody back into the final salary scheme. As a start, at some point you're going to be allowed to choose either one of these, but for the moment they're putting you back into the final salary scheme. And here's the problem. Those three options in the career average are not available in the final salary. So there's got to be some way of saying, what happened to your money? Well, one of the ways is you can get a refund of that money with some interest. Or you can convert it, and you can convert it to additional pension in the final salary scheme. Now, the final salary scheme only has additional pension, so all three of these can only be converted to additional pension. And this is where the letters that are coming out that I've got grave concerns about, they're actually, and the fact that I think they're misleading you. The letter that came out before April, I've seen there's been a change. The letters that came out looked something like this. They gave you three options. They told you how much you'd paid for whatever it is you were buying. And they told you how much they would refund you. And they would tell you what you would get as additional pension. Now, it lacks, I think, some what I consider very important details. Firstly, the compensation amount. They do not explain if that is the amount you will receive or if you'll get it and then the taxman comes calling wanting 20% of it or so, or 40%. Well, anger is good for me if it leads to doing something constructive. And so I have complained, and well, I can't complain because I didn't buy any of these. I would have done it in final salary, but I didn't buy them. And I've encouraged lots of other people who had these letters to send in complaints and asking for more details on what's happening. Well, the good news is that we've been told now that this compensation is tax-free. And so, bye-bye, taxman. Thank you very much. You're not getting your hands on the compensation, which is good. At least we've got the clarity there. But that's not the end of my anger. It's not the end of me looking at this and thinking there is something wrong here, something else wrong. And this is the part that has really wound me up. There's no dates involved for the valuation of the converted amounts or the original amounts for that matter. And inflation is a very important factor of the teacher's pension scheme. It gets added every year. And in this case, the amount they're offering you and the amount they're offering to convert it to have no reference date So you're being given a compensation figure, which is what you'd get now. But these other figures, are they what you would get now, or are they at some other date in the past? And it's because of this that I think every teacher who's received one of these letters in particular, the letters we're showing here that has changed, but if you've got one of these, and a lot of people had them, before April probably, there's no date of reference telling you where these valuations are made up to. And again, so we've encouraged lots of people to make complaints who've had these letters, pointing out that if you're not being given comparable figures, how can you make the comparison? You can't. And those complaints have led to a change. We've now got a new version of this letter coming out, and the key part I've highlighted here, the key part is that they're telling us when the valuations of the additional pension, APB, additional pension benefit, when that valuation is, and also what the valuation of the other figure, what you'd get if you later on decided to go with the career average. And why does this matter? Well, it matters because this figure of compensation, my 12,387 in this letter, is based on you getting that money now. If you ask for the refund, they're saying this is how much they will actually pay you. There's no income tax and nothing like that. How much inflation has been added to these figures? Well, these other two figures that you've been given, we now know that those are the values in 2022. Well, since 2022, we've had inflation of 10.1%, and this year, 6.7%. A combination of over 17%. So this value of 886 that you've been given is not comparable to the amount of compensation you're being asked to choose between. You're asked to choose between having £880 or 12,000. And that's not true, because that 2022 figure, if we add on that inflation, is actually worth a lot more. It's over £1,000. And for the faster accrual, it's even worse. For the faster accrual, every year you're still in the scheme, it gets an extra 1.6% on top of inflation. And that means that the faster accrual figure here, nearly 890, is nearly 21% undervalued compared to what it would be in 2024. So the figures that have been given out, I think, are woefully misleading. You're being told 800 against 12,000, but it's not 800, it's £1,000. So that's bad enough, isn't it? That's bad enough, that's right. But that's actually only the case if you're dealing with faster accrual or the buyout. In both of those cases, we've been told that those valuations are to April 2022. It's not the worst case. If you bought additional pension, remember that third option? If you bought additional pension in the remedy period, the conversion date is based on the date you bought or started buying that additional pension. That could be over 9 years ago. So the figure you're being given, if you're buying additional pension, could be 9 years out of date. Here's an example. In this letter, for converting additional pension, the conversion date on this letter is different. It's not dated to the 1st of April 2022. We're being told it's valued at the date of your original election. So if you started buying it in 2022, yes, it'll be 2022. But if you started buying it in 2018, that's when inflation will be added from. If you started buying it at the earliest possible time, April 2015, that's over 9 years worth of inflation. So let's just get rid of that letter now and just focus on the figures involved in that letter. The dates I've put in, don't be fooled by those. So when somebody gets this letter and has had this letter, they're being given a straight 26,000 against 1,200 or 1,700. There is no mention of the dates on some of the letters. And in here, I don't think many people are going to look at those and say, oh yeah, we've got to add some inflation. I've got to add inflation to it myself. They're going to look at those numbers. And that is the comparison I think the letter is encouraging. And of course, it is wrong. Inflation since 2015 has totaled nearly 32%. Wow. So instead of looking at 1200 and 1700, we're looking at nearly 1700 and 2300. And it is these figures that I think should be being compared. We're not comparing the compensation against that first set of numbers, the numbers that are in the letter. We should be comparing the compensation against the same value at the same time now in 2024. So we should really be looking at this last loan and saying, what are the comparable values? If I'm being asked to spend £26,000, if I go with that 1200, it's going to take me 22 years to make up for that £26,000. However, if I add on inflation, as we have to do, that 1700 is going to be closer to 15 years, 16 years, but nowhere near 22. And that is the reason I'm still angry about this. I think anybody who's had these letters, if you had a letter before March and you've made your choice already, I think you've been seriously misled. I think you've been given a set of figures that are incomparable at best, misleading definitely, and I think you've got a case to go back and say to them, you didn't give me the correct data and I want to complain about this. If you've had one of those letters and you've had a letter without the dates and you've had a letter without notification that you're going to have to add inflation, I would encourage you to complain to the TPS and say, I can't compare what you're giving me without knowing the true value at the same period in time. No good telling me that it's 10 years ago, 9 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago. I want to know how much I'm giving up now. And then I can make the comparison. At this point now, you see, this person, I'm essentially saying I want to spend £26,000. And for that, I'm going to get £1,600 in my final salary pension. Or if I decide that career average better is better later on, 2,300. You know, that's going to take 11 years, 12 years, 11 years to catch up with the amount of compensation. Rant over. Thank you. Good luck.